Good evening and welcome to this episode of Coach's Corner. My name is Dwayne Dwyer. I go by the Mindset Coach,
My name is the Uncle Junior, and I go by the consistency coach.
and we are the coaches of Coach's Corner. As always, like I tend to say, if you're here and you don't want to capitalize off of this information that we're going to share, if you don't want to take it and employ it in your life and actually be an impact to other people, then you may not necessarily be in the right place because that's what this show is all about. This show is centered around actually sharing valuable insights and information that can help you do things better, not only better for yourself, but better for the people that surround you. So, with that being said, as always, it's a pleasure to be here in this present in this platform because we believe that you're destined to be here. Not only that, we think that you specifically on this evening, this time, you were destined to be here to hear the voice of myself, the mindset coach, and my good friend, the consistency coach, on and hear what we're going to talk about. And this one, I believe, just like the past few, is going to be a smoker. So that being said, let me speak to my good friend, the Uncle Junior, the consistency coach, the brother I affectionately call C Square. How are you doing this evening, brother?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good.
Good.
Excited. Got my tea over here, full of
Mhm.
energy. I'm ready to get this party started.
All right. I ain't got no tea, but I got some water, man. Um, Shout out to the chat. Shout out to everybody being here. Really appreciate you. We understand that on Tuesday nights you guys could be anywhere else, but you have decided to come and hang out with us for an hour or so. So really appreciate that. While you're here, go and hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of those different things like that. We're gonna go ahead and get right into it, man, if that's okay with you,
Let's
because
do it.
you ready? All right, because man, um, as I was coming up with we come up with we usually come up with our own topics, we kind of alternate conversations going back and forth. So if you see, like, if you notice, the shows that coach comes up with, the shows that coach lead, he comes up with the topics. The shows that I lead, I come up with the topic. And we both are 49, 51, and we have adult children. We have kids who have gone, and some have kids, some of 'em don't, some in military, working different jobs, different careers and stuff like that. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, especially with coach, because he is a father, he is a coach, he is a leader, he is someone, that I look at as one of my mentors. I have a bunch of different mentors for a bunch of different things. So for part of my life, I look towards coach for a certain amount of guidance. Whether or not he knows that or not, he know it now. So and I appreciate you for that. I appreciate you being that constant, consistent person in my life on Tuesdays and Fridays and any other time I pick up a phone or text or anything like that. So here are some flowers for you, brother. But with all that being said, man, we got adult kids now, and we got kids and they out the house, and some of them may not be. And it's like, when our kids left, were they ready to lead, or were they just ready to follow? And I think there may be some pros and cons, or I don't know, maybe I won't even say that. I'll retract that statement. But I just kind of want to get into that, man. So with that being said, coach, why do you think that I'll take the scroll off. Why do you think that this topic is important? Is your child ready to lead or just follow? Why do you think that this is an important topic that adults and parents need to be having?
So, first of all, great question. And let me back up because I dare not answer this question without appreciating what you actually said. So, I want you to know that I greatly appreciate everything that you said just now. I don't take things like that lightly. So I don't want to not acknowledge that openly and publicly in front of everybody. I appreciate everything you just said. That means a lot to me. Um, to this question, why I think it's important, because I believe that we're in our younger years. And again, this is not general for everybody. I think that we go through stages. And so we'll go through a stage to where we don't really feel good about ourselves. There's some insecurities, whatever the case may be. But then when you come out of that, somehow, for whatever reason, you go to the other side of the extreme and you feel really good about yourself. And there may be a lot of arrogance that exists within that person. walking around your chest up, your head held high, all that other great stuff, smelling the high altitude of the air and forget to smell the roses and things of that nature. So I think that's where I will start when it comes down to why this topic is important, because I think as a parent, we have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to teach them all echelons of reality so that they can understand. And I don't want to go too far into this conversation because I'm sure you're going to ask this going forward, but so that they can understand why timing is important. I think a lot of times, because we live in a microwave society, the only time that matters in people's life is now. So, and what I mean when I say that, um, to where that statement is a true statement, the only time that matters is now. But what I'm saying in this regard is that we see moments and we want the moments to happen every day. Well, moments don't happen every day. And that's one of the most important things that we have to teach our children. We work towards the moments, but in between those moments, who are you? Right? You'll have a moment to where you achieve something great, you get recognized for something or whatever that looks like. But what happens in between that moment and the next moment? So I think that's one of the reasons why this topic is important because, like I've said before, when and you can tell me if I'm wrong because you have kids as well. Well, you have adult kids as well. When they were born, nobody gave me an instruction manual. Say, here's the most effective way
Mm.
of raising that child. Nobody pointed me to where the instructions existed. So my metric of fatherhood was based upon what I thought fatherhood was, and keep in mind that metric was also governed by a father who was absent. And good, bad, or indifferent, whatever happened in their relationship, that's their business, and I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying, for a young boy growing up and not seeing what fatherhood looks like, that's very difficult to try to emulate, and you don't want to emulate that. What you want to do is emulate a better understanding of what you got from that. So again, got a little long-winded on this particular question because I'm really excited about this topic.
Yeah, I am too, man. I don't think you went long with it. I think you went um just the right amount of time, and I know, we're older now, and you can't go back, we always like, when I was 18 this, when I was 16 this, we always a lot of us grew up telling our kids when what we did when we were their age, and things are different. When I graduated high school in 1993, that's different than what I'm seeing in the high schools now here, 32 years later. So when you were their age, whatever ages your children are, you don't have to get specific into every single one to give out age. You can give approximates or whatever like that. Did you lead or did you follow? And then kind of expand on it.
you know
And I know ours may be a little bit different than a lot of people because we were in the military. So
I bet you it's not. um, I think the answer to this question has to be yes. That's the overarching answer, and then I want to kind of
yes.
explain what I mean when I say that, because in our minds, when we reflect back and we try to tell the story, we find pockets to where we thought we were leading, but when we got to the point of recognizing what leadership was all about, you were still following. Like you were trying to be like somebody else. You were trying to emulate something else you've seen, even if you had people who thought you were charismatic and try to do the things that you were doing, you were really doing it something that you've seen somebody else doing. So even in the aspects of you thinking you are leading at a very young age, you're still following. And so you probably was the lead follower of followers, right? Um, but don't get me wrong, I do know that there are some people, and again, let's not confuse charisma with leadership, right? Charisma is just a character trait that exists in leadership, but you don't necessarily have to be charismatic to be a leader. So when I look at me being their age, I don't think I was a leader, by itself, isolated, right? Did I lead some things? Sure. But did I follow? Absolutely. Because, like I said before, and I say it again, I had low self esteem. Remember, back during our era, to be dark skinned wasn't cool. So because of what was in me, it prevented, well, because of the insecurities that was in me, it prevented the potential that was in me from coming out because I was afraid that people wouldn't be accepting of it. So for those pockets where I felt that people would allow me to lead, then I would show up as a leader to them. but then to other people in their mind, like, yeah, he wasn't no leader. And so that's kind of like how I look at it. I think to define a leader, it can't be defined by the leader. It must be defined by the follower, right? The follower is the one who defines the leader. But then by that same token, the leader does not look at themselves and say, I'm the leader. No. What they recognize is that even though I am a de facto leader, I serve them. So that's the true metric of leadership. And when I go back and think about it as a kid, a young adult, I can't really say I really served them. I would say I led them, but it was probably from a space of self-service because I never knew anything about servant leadership. And so that's kind of like where I would start out. Did I follow? Absolutely. I followed all the time because I was looking to be accepted. Again, riddled with insecurities, absent father, dark skin, all of that other stuff worked against me because I allowed it to. Once I got to the point of knowing better, then those things kind of fell off or I shook them off. And then I became very arrogant. Like I really started smelling myself, talking about smelling the high altitudes of the earth. That was me.
Mhm.
And it showed. It showed. I was playing football. I was in the gym. I was getting a little mass about me. People who was like turning their nose up at me was starting to do this right here. You know what I'm saying? And at that point in time, I was like, go away. That's so
Mhm.
I can't say that with that attitude, I was a leader. So
Yeah.
again, another long-winded explanation, man, but great question.
Man, I'm looking back. My sons are all right. So they're 19, 23, and Brandon just turned 30. So let me kind of go through where they were, where I was at their age. At 19, I had my first child. So I was a father at 19. By the time, and let me see, I was in the military, young private probably at the time. So I can pretty much say I was not leading anything. And if I was leading, it was probably leading somebody down the wrong path.
Yeah.
So by the time I was 23, I think I'd had 19, I think I may have had both sons, maybe just one at the time. But still flopping, still not going, still not really leading nothing. And if I am leading, so I mean, at 23, I was in a leadership position. I was a husband at the time,
Hmm.
so and I was a father. So on paper, I was a leader, but was I leading effectively as a husband at the time? Probably not. Was I leading effectively um as a husband and father? Like I said, probably not, but I was still leading. But to your point and to something you said earlier, I probably was still following someone else's guidance. I probably was still leading my relationship based off of what I may have saw this couple do, or maybe what I saw or heard, maybe what went on in my with my parents. So, and then you go to my other one right now, and he's 30. He has wife, he has two kids. I had a wife and three kids at the time, and I think that I was at least an E5 during that time. So he's an E5. So I think when I was 30, out my leadership had probably got a little bit better. I think I had moved away from that last duty station where I got in a lot of trouble. So I think I probably was more in the leadership. Leadership could be seen a lot more in me at 30 than it did at 19 and 23.
Sure.
So when I was their age, did I lead or follow? Again, my answer is like yours. Yes. The answer
Hmm.
is yes. So both, and it looked a little bit different based off the ages of the kids.
And let me add this to it as well, because I'm
Mhm.
sure somebody in the chat has already said it. Making decisions and leading is not the same thing.
Mm.
Everybody makes decisions. That's why I said what I said. Like even when I was in the army, my leadership style was structured by the army. One of the things I used to hear all the time is that we're not in the army. My ex-wife used to tell me that all the time. So
Mhm.
even in self-reflection, I realized that my leadership style was crafted by the army, and I thought I could bring that home. And I'm not saying I put my kids in the front lean and rest, even though there have been many times I wanted to.
Hey.
I didn't do that. But there have been times where the knife hand may have came out, and a very stern voice came out. And then as I got older, I realized that, there is a time for that. but it should not be all the time, right? Um, so that's why I say what I say is it's like taking seeing this person do a thing and taking bits from this person, seeing this person do a thing, taking bits from this person. There's nothing wrong with that. That is
Yeah.
actually a good thing to do. And then, but you have to take it and put it in a pot, and mix it up, and add your personality to it. And now it becomes yours. Right. So that's why I say what I say. And again, it's not to go against anything that you said.
Hmm.
It's just to kind of help people to understand we're not saying that, oh, you're a follower because you adopted this from this person. No,
Yeah.
that's what you're supposed to do.
Hmm.
But don't adopt it from them and try to mirror them exactly the way they do it because now you're not being your authentic self.
Yeah. I agree with that. Um, I'm gonna move on to the next question. When we were young, when we were our kids' ages, one thing we didn't have was internet and social media and all of those different things. So, you know, we look and we see people online and social media all the time. We're on social media right now, and but with that being said, do you think that someone can be a leader on social media and still lack personal discipline in real life?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I don't want to just leave it at that though, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times what you see on social media are what we call actors. They've practiced and rehearsed this person that you see behind the screen. The real question is, do you have any encounter with them off screen? Have you seen them in action off screen? A lot of the people that um, we in our lifetime in our lifespan, a lot of the people that we look up to, I say it that way. If you really research their life, they got issues just like you do. They go through, some concerns just like you do. You've seen that in a lot, and I don't have to call any particular name, but there's an individual who got extreme popularity in the podcasting world not too long ago, right? Started, I'd say about maybe 2, 3 years ago, starting. Um, and because of some mishaps, that's what I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna leave names out of it intentionally. But because of some mishaps, that person now does not necessarily have the popularity that they used to have. So the question that you have to ask is: this just a one-time thing, an isolated event, or is that kind of like their lifestyle, and you never knew that because they were not in the public eye like they are right now? So that's just one example. Is that the exception to the rule? Maybe. But at the end of the day, you don't know whether or not these people who are talking to you maybe 1 hour a week, or maybe 1 hour a month, or on a movie screen, on a TV show, you don't know if that person has personal discipline because you don't have a personal relationship with that person. But if you do, then that can be the evidence that you can compare to the person that's on screen. Are they the same person on screen as they are in their everyday life? And if they are, then you can say that they're not putting on a facade when they're on screen. But I think for the most part, when you look at this question, the easy answer to this question is yes. Somebody can be a leader on social media. And again, it's not a leader to everybody because some people have the maturity to recognize that I am only in this space to get what I need in this particular moment in time. So now I am a follower of this person because they know something more than what I actually know. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not necessarily saying I'm viewing them as a leader. I'm viewing them as a source of information. But there are some people who are literally, and I'm going to use this term loosely, they're literally in love with the talking head that they see.
See, you started stealing my thunder at the end. All right, but I'm gonna go there anyway. That's what I was talking about. All you had all great points. I understood everything that you were talking about. But the part I wanted to talk about was like what you said. So I was following somebody hard during like the pandemic and stuff like this. Um, a financial person, and then he got caught up in some stuff, and then he was off the platform, and he wasn't out there no more. But I gained a lot of financial knowledge and information from him, and I still wanted to hear from this person afterwards because what he did in his personal life to get caught up with another lady, whatever like that, didn't have anything to do with the information that he was providing me every single day or every week. So and that's where I was kind of, you kind of walked it out for me. There wasn't necessarily someone. I thought that this person was a leader, and he may be a leader. He may just not been a leader for me, but for me, he was more so a source of information. You know what I'm saying? So I think being able to distinguish between who's a leader and who's a source of information is important too, because it could be the same person. Like
Yeah.
for you, you are a leader and you are a source of information for people. But there are some other things. I'm not saying that you're not personal, you don't have personal
Sure.
discipline, but there may be, I'm gonna use you for an example, but there may be something in coach's life that's not disciplined. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? And that could be for anybody. So I think that, when you're looking at somebody to be a leader, um, I don't know. Now I'm even thinking about it more because when you appoint somebody as a leader, I think I'm gonna think for right now, and I want to slide over to the church. When we look at a person in the pulpit or a pastor and we say, "Hey, you're my leader. I'm going to allow you to lead my part of my spiritual journey. I'm going to trust that you are hearing from God and that what you are presenting is based off of the principles that are in the Bible, right? So
Hmm.
I do want that person to have some personal discipline, but can I separate that pastor as being a leader, or is or can he just be used as a source of information? I don't know. I don't, now that we talked about someone as a source of information, kind of like a few weeks ago on Friday night when I was doing a show, um, opened up something different.
Hmm.
So just
That's why.
having a different term or different thing just is making me question a lot more things right now.
That's why I structured it the way that I did.
Hmm.
Because let's be honest, there are some people on social media, they don't want to be your leader.
Hmm.
You just want the followers, right?
Yeah.
The followers, as far as this algorithm, the likes, and things of that nature, because they went into social media with a particular purpose. They didn't ask to be your leader. You just adopted them as your leader.
Yeah.
So now, is that person at fault because they don't have personal discipline? They are, to the person who it matters. But to you, who you adopted them as their leader, they're not accountable to you. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like where I go. Everybody, I don't care who you are, and let me say this clear. Everybody is struggling in some particular area of their life when it comes down to personal discipline. Period. It's a known fact. If you believe that you got it all together, just give time. I'll prove myself to you without even coming to you.
Hmm.
However, let's go back to the person that is an appointed leader now, right? Does that person now become exempt from not being a part of the population that I was just talking about? Everybody, I don't care who you are, there's the area in your life where you're struggling with personal discipline and you're working on that. So when you appoint somebody in a position of leadership and they show themselves to be human, do you now remove them from leadership or do you recognize them as just simply being human? And I
Mhm.
think that's the maturity aspect of being a follower. I don't expect the person who is like, I would say, w- situation everybody knows about, everybody around our age. When President Clinton went through his thing, it was like,
Mhm.
oh, he needs to be. And I'm not saying what he did was right. Let's start that. I'm not saying what he did was right. That's number one. Bottom line up front. I'm not saying what he did is right. However, at the end of the day, I think the world was in a shock because he proved himself to be a human. But then I asked the question, was he the only one? Or was he the one that got caught?
He was the one that got caught. I mean, I ain't gonna say all men of power, but a lot of
Leadership.
men of power, that's something that comes with the territory. There's always people who seek out people who are in power.
And I won't just leave it at men. I would say people in power, right?
People.
Because I
Mhm.
think that works both ways.
It
right?
does.
Everybody wants, like you remember when we was in the army. Whenever the commander walked in the room, everybody wants some of the commander's time. Why? Just simply
Mhm.
because they're the commander,
Yeah.
not because of anything else, just because they're the leader. And so when
Mhm.
they get their opportunity, we had to be in the meetings with, hey, you got a total of 3 minutes. So you better get to the point. Don't be trying to be sage on the stage because we're gonna pull a rug from up under you. And
Mhm.
that was the briefing we had to give to every officer in the unit before the commander came in the room. It is what it is.
And I'm wondering if some point, not necessarily we need to have a show, but at some point, do we need to talk about the difference between a leader and a person who is just a source of information? Because I think those, I think I think they're close. I think that they're not too far apart from who I don't think they're too far apart from who we are. And I look at like pastors. You know, a lot of people say pastors are leaders. You know what I mean? But for some people, they're just a source of information, you know, and people who look at the pastor as leader, if you only see him as a source of information, they're like, well, it's an issue. I don't know. I'm kind of thinking out loud right now, and then I should be focused on the show. So, with that being said, let me slide around over here, and we're gonna get to our first fact or myth question of the evening. And this is a good one. So I'm very interested in hearing and seeing what the chat says about this too, because I think this is something we have heard forever. So, Coach, what say you? Leaders are born, not made.
I have this conversation literally almost once a month.
I
Um,
don't doubt it.
and I've had it at least for the past 6 years.
Hmm.
Um, and as people are typing their answer, fact or myth, I would say it's neither. It's neither
Mm,
fact or myth. I think in the grand scheme of things, there are situations to where um, your innate ability shows up, and what you do, what you're good at, whatever the case may be, makes you a leader in that particular moment in time. I give you a perfect example. Whenever there is a natural disaster, hurricane, people show up, and those people who show up to help other people, they save lives. And if you are that person that is in need at that particular point in time, you will subject yourself to what it is they're asking you to do because they're trying to help you. That's not something that they had to go to any leadership development course or anything to do. That's just something in them that said, I need to help my fellow man. I have the resources. Let me risk my life to save theirs. But then there are plenty of situations, and we see it all the time in the work setting. You go to this leadership development course, you graduate, you get the certification, you get promoted, now you put in a position of leadership, and then your leader mentors you into being a great leader. So even though this answer seemed like, to some people it seems simple. To some people, like, I don't know, the answer is neither. Leaders are not, leaders are, correction, the answer is both. Leaders are both born and made. And I'm not talking about born from the case of just being born, right? Again, like I said, some people have it in them when it comes down to certain situations. Even when I do the disc assessment, right? One of the things I talk about is that whatever your letter is, when the situation presents itself that lines up with that letter, then you can be seen as a leader once you start exercising what you know within that realm.
mm. Yeah, I like it being both as well. I do believe that not literally leaders are born, but I do think that people are born with certain inherent leadership traits and capabilities and stuff. And I've seen it in elementary school. You know, I've seen kids, stand up and be leaders, kindergarten, first grade. So whether that was taught to them between the ages of 0 and 5 or 0 and 6, or whether they were born with it, I don't necessarily know. And I also think that leaders can be made as well. I don't think that I was born with a lot of those inherent leadership qualities. I think a lot of the ones that I learned and I picked up along the way through some courses, through mentorship, through following people, through a bunch of different avenues and approaches. I do think that I was born with some things that made leadership easier, you know, and like the ability, caring for people, the ability to, just different things. So I think for me personally, I think for me, mine was mostly made. But I do think that there was definitely some sprinkle of some things that I inherited from whether genetics or just luck of the draw,
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, man.
Next one. Fact or myth? You have to be extroverted to be a great leader.
100%, without a doubt, unequivocally, and I said that right for y'all who are
Mhm.
listening, unequivocally, myth. That
What?
yes,
So the
definitely.
guy that's yelling in the pulpit, every week, on Sunday morning, like that extroverted, that don't mean he a great leader because he
Listen,
or
listen,
Stephen A. Smith.
listen, before I answer that question, if y'all don't go back and replay just that segment alone, something's wrong with you. No, I don't have to be an extrovert to be a great leader. That's why I brought up the DISC assessment, right?
Mhm.
When you really look at the DISC assessment, like I can't stress it enough. Okay, let me talk about me. So, for those of you who don't understand DISC, it takes four letters: D-I-S and C. Um, and it has this thing called the midline. So whatever those letters for you are above the midline, those are your stronger, kind of like your stronger character traits, which is what kind of like what I say. And so that being said, a D is an extrovert, and an I is an extrovert, but an S and a C in most cases are not. Um, but you're generally a combination of two. And so the last one I did, I had it was a special combination that falls in that special category. So I'm a high C, which means that I am an information person. My next high letter is an S, and then the next high letter is an I. All of those are above the midline. The D is actually below the midline. But most people who know me, they think I'm a D, right? No pun intended. Watch them out. They think I'm a D. But the reality of the truth is, if the situation presents itself the right way, if I have enough information, if I have the right people, right, and the environment is right, then I will show up as a D. I give you a perfect example. We were coming from a funeral one time, and I was kind of late coming out, and so my cousin's car broke down on the side of the road. I think he had a flat tire, and so when I seen it, I pulled over behind him, and I got out the truck, and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" He said, "Man, we got a flat." I'm like, "Okay." So I'm waiting on him to tell me what he wants to do, and so it took him too long to say anything. I said, "Okay, all y'all get out the car, go get in my truck." I say, "I'm gonna take y'all home. Don, me and you, we're gonna come back and we're gonna get this car." And I'm telling you, the most illegal thing I've done in my life. During this time, I'm driving a Chevy Avalanche. I had like seven people packed in the Avalanche, bro. I'm just saying. But at the end of the day, I got everybody home safe, and me and him went back out there and changed the tire. There's no need to keep women and children out there on the side of the road while we fix a car. So that's kind of like what I'm saying. When you look at it, you don't have to be an extrovert to be a leader. The situation just have to be conducive for you to show up.
Yeah, I hit that button by accident. That's the part that I've always known, you know. But for some reason, sometimes when you go to these events and these leadership conferences and you go to these places and they're talking about leadership, maybe I'm going to some of the wrong ones, but a lot of them, not a lot of them. Now I'm thinking about what type of leadership conferences I'm going to. But there's definitely something being said about being that extroverted leader when you and maybe that's in the sales space. Maybe more so in sales. That's where that comes from.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, maybe that's a sales thing. But in the military, I think I saw both. I think I saw early on, I saw the when I was young, the knife hand, that stern, boisterous E7 or E6, I looked at that as great leadership. But then as I got older, man, I remember, that guy over there that's in the motor pool that don't talk much or whatever like this, and you go and have a conversation with him, that joker giving you all kind of knowledge and wisdom and information. And I'm just like, hold on, where you been? You know what I mean? You off in the corner somewhere. So I am a firm believer that this is nowhere near a fact, and this is just a myth. You do not have to be extroverted to be a great leader. Leaders come in all different shapes and sizes and voices and extrovert and introvert and all of those different things. So that's what I believe.
So this goes back to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the
Hmm.
difference between perspective and perception.
Mm.
When this thing has a misinterpreted perspective of what leadership looks like, then the only person I can see is that loudmouth.
Yeah.
But once it starts turning over and I start seeing leadership through a different lens, I realize that this person over here who is quiet and doesn't speak much, but when they speak, it reverberates across the entire
Hmm.
platform, not because they're loud, but because the volume of what they're saying. And so I can see that person now only because this thing has changed. This, when I say this thing, I mean the entirety of this thing. This thing has changed, and my aperture for understanding leadership has expanded. But in our younger years, rah, 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 that's a leader,
Yeah.
right? Even going back to the realm of sales, sales used to be you had to be a shark, right? That's what they would
Hmm.
teach. But then they realized that sharks create what they call buyer's remorse. You may buy it because you're intimidated, but by the time you get home, you realize that I don't even want this thing. And then they
Yeah.
bring it back to the store and return it. So even in the sales arena, it is turning over.
Mm. That's interesting. I never knew that. Here's another fact or myth before we move on. Jeez, you rolling. Dang. Um, Fact or myth, most people follow because it's easier than thinking for themselves. Most people follow because it's easier than thinking for themselves.
Very interesting question.
See what I
And
did?
I did. And in an event, I'm trying to give people time to give their answers in the chat, and I'm loving the fact that people are answering fast, right? Because this is the
Mhm,
easy one, right?
mhm.
The answer to this question is absolutely a fact. Now I got it. It's not
I
general.
heard people toes. They on their toes.
I got it. Is that what's that old saying? Um, 95% of the people of the world think they think. Oh, I'm sorry. 2% of the people in the world actually think. 3% of the people in the world think they think, and 95% of the people in the world would rather die before they think.
Mm.
That is the absolutely true. It is easier to follow. You see it in the world today, right? And I use the housing market as a very simple example, it does not. The analogy does not fit 100%. I get that, but notice most people, the younger generation, are not quick to buy homes. They prefer to get apartments, whatever the case may be. Why? Because they don't want the responsibility that comes along with home ownership. Well, most people don't want the responsibility of being leaders. A lot of people who retire from the military, they were leaders for so long. They retire and they literally will say out their mouth, "Man, I'm just gonna go get me a job. I don't want to be in charge of nothing." And that's really what it is. They've done it their whole life. They don't want to do it anymore. And so, so that's for those people. But I would be honest with you. This right here is a fact. A lot of people don't want to think. They want you to think for them and then tell them how to do what you said.
Yeah. If I'm only using fact or myth, I'm going with fact. Um, the only hesitancy, you know the word I'm trying to say, is that is that an absolute, and that's the only reason. But I'm like 99.99%, and I see it all the time. I see it on social media, and I look at stuff that people post. I'm like, there's nowhere in the world you know about the three branches of government if you were posting stuff like this. There's no way you have a clue, and there's no shade to people, but most people, the average person, don't have the time to dig deep for certain information either. So a lot of times they're just getting, what they learn on Coach's Corner, or what they learn on, Hearts of Men, or what they learn on this podcast or this social media or this post, or or whatever like this. So people are getting information in bites and stuff, but people are not really taking the time and breaking down information. And all of it ain't because they don't want to, but it's so much information, and it's so, a lot of stuff goes a lot deeper than what we see on the surface. You know what I mean? You, someone will post something about the president or a former president or something, and I'm just like, there's no way in the world that you did any thinking about this. Like, and not just that, but on a lot of stuff, it's just, I think people don't have the time to think about a lot of stuff. So for most people, saying, like, this would be fact, because most people don't have the time to do it, and if they have the time and even work the 8-10 hours a day, do you really want to go home and really think about politics and think about everything that's going on in the world? You really don't want to do that. You want to spend time with your kids or your old lady or your old man, or go on vacation, go to a trip. That's the stuff that most people are doing with their spare time, not researching data and information so they can prove somebody right or wrong on the information. Most people have kind of fell into a group of people and kind of adopted that way of thinking, and then that becomes how they think going forward. So versus getting their own information. So
Yeah.
anything else you want to add to this fact or myth?
Yeah, and so I love what you just said. And Lil Coach actually did a Q&A, and if you guys don't know who Lil Coach is, hey, go check out Lil Coach.
I
He
saw
put
Lil Coach on TikTok.
you seen Lil Coach? Lil Coach putting it out
Hmm.
there. And the question that he answered was a great question. When you look at community development, why does it seem like the efforts for community development are futile? And his response, I thought, was a great response, because one of the things he talked about is reality. I think some people, a lot of people, to be honest with you, they struggle with being able to clearly identify and discern reality, because within the space of, you know, um, the truth, what is true, fact, assumptions, and opinions, mostly what you're hearing in real time is somebody else's opinion. That's for starters. But then when it comes down to thinking, this is going back to this question. This is the tricky part, because when it comes down to thinking, in order for me to reason properly, I have to be able to discern data. And you guys remember this if you're about our age, because at one point in time in the job market, what was one of the biggest jobs there were was data processing. Data means absolutely nothing. That's what people are getting. They're getting data, and they're trying to assume that they're thinking, because what they try to do is they take raw data and try to regurgitate it. And all it takes is somebody who has just curiosity to ask the right question, and now you're stumped, because you never took the time to process the data so that data can turn from information. Let me be clear. The information that you're hearing us share with you, to you, is data, especially if it's the first time you heard it. You must process that data for it to become information. That information now must be analyzed in order for it to become knowledge. And then once it gets to knowledge, it must be practical to you in order for it to become of any value. Knowledge without practicality means absolutely nothing. And what you see a lot of time in social media is that people are giving you data, and in some instances, they're giving you information. But a lot of times, I don't think you see where they take that information, analyze it, transform it into knowledge, practice it, learn from the practice so that they can transfer that knowledge into wisdom, and now sharing the wisdom that they get.
Bro, he was on that. There's a short in there, a YouTube short somewhere in there, a little snippet of that I need to make sure that I pull out.
The information that you're hearing us share with you, to you, is data, especially if it's the first time you heard it. You must process that data for it to become information. That information now must be analyzed in order for it to become knowledge. And then once it gets to knowledge, it must be practical to you in order for it to become of any value.
Um, great little segment to add on to the conversation, to this factor myth. I wanted to hit a question, but I think I'm gonna slide down to a scenario question, right? So it ain't in order the way I wanted it, but it of course gonna work for today. So your son applied for a leadership course in the military, but didn't get selected. He starts doubting himself, questioning whether he's leadership material at all. Now, and if you're at home and you're watching this, if you're in the chat or something like this, you can take out the military and you can add in his job or whatever like that. So, coach, again, and for the chat, here's a scenario question. Your son applied for a leadership course in the military but didn't get selected. He starts doubting himself, questioning whether he's leadership material at home. How is this conversation going between you and your son or your son?
Well, first and foremost, I want to understand why he doubted himself.
Mm,
That's where I would start. I don't even want to focus on him not being selected for the course yet, because I think the fact that he is doubting himself is revealing something deeper. Remember, material is material, but that material must be like you got to think about it, create something. And then ultimately, when you create something in your mind for that material, now that material becomes something usable. That material can turn into an item of clothing, that material can turn into the covering for some type of furniture or whatever that looks like. So, him being leadership material, what we're trying to do at this point is understanding why he is doubting himself. Because if you want to be a leader, most people aren't going to follow a leader that has doubt, a lot of doubt, right? So if you're doubting yourself, let's tackle that first. Let's have a conversation to understand why you're doubting yourself. Are you doubting yourself simply because you weren't selected? Then I would say that the military made the right choice, especially if you're doubting yourself because you weren't selected. The right posture would be to say, hey, there's a time and a season for everything. I didn't get selected for this one, but there's another one coming around. So let me apply for that. And in the meantime, let me work on the material that's in me so that when I go to this leadership course, I can actually excel. So that's kind of like how that conversation will go. It's not going to be as easy and as rapid as I said it, but in the midst of talking about doubting himself, you may learn something about your son. And most importantly, he learned something about himself. And whatever it is he learned about himself, now you have something to work with because that's the material that we're looking for.
I like that, and I like that approach to it too. And like you said, maybe after the conversation, maybe he realizes that he shouldn't have got that position. Maybe you didn't qualify or for whatever reason. But I do think and you do have to start with why are you doubting yourself? You can't move on to anything else until we figure that piece out because maybe you're doubting yourself had to do with the fact that you didn't study like you were supposed to. Maybe you're really not qualified. Maybe, like you said, they saw the self doubt in you and acted accordingly, acted appropriately, So I'm with you. I definitely think that this conversation needs to start with him doubting himself before you can move on to anything else. Look at the time. Shoot. Um, here's another one. Your 20-year-old child or adult, however you want to call him, comes to you for advice. He has been offered a high paying job, but the company has shady ethics. He is unsure of what to do. Now, this applies to anybody, whether you're a man listening to this, whether you're a woman listening to this, your child in general comes to you like, look, mom, dad, I'm about to get this bag. But you know what? They be doing some shady stuff. You know what I'm saying? And remember, in this situation, your child is 20 years old. So, how, and they are coming to you for advice.
Mhm.
So, I'm really interested in what the chat gonna have to say. But until I read all of them, what do you think, Coach? How's this conversation going between you and your 20-year-old child?
So you played dominoes before, right?
Absolutely.
What is the say,
Dominologist.
what is the saying that we have when playing dominoes?
10 get you 20.
10 get you
Okay.
20, sure, but all money ain't good money.
All money ain't good money.
That's the rudimentary saying. And the reason why that's the case for those people who don't know is because I can bait you.
Hmm.
I can put a potential score on the table for you, but if you
Hmm.
take it, Now you just gave me what I really wanted to set you up to win the game in its entirety. That's my mindset when he comes to me with this conversation. But because he is a 20-year-old man, I'm not going to project that on him. He is unsure what to do. I want to stay there. What is it that makes you unsure about what to do? Because in my mind, I already know you shouldn't take this job, but I'm not
Yeah.
going to tell you that. I want you to come to that understanding on your own. So, why are you unsure about taking this job? And then in the midst of that conversation, we develop that conversation until he come to his own decision that this may not necessarily be the job for me. If I got offered a high paying job and this company has shady ethics, there's a high probability that I can get hired, I get offered another high paying job from a company that actually has ethics that lines up with my ethics. And so that's the direction I would like the conversation to go in. But you got to keep in mind, he's an adult. I can't tell him I shouldn't tell him what to do. I respect the fact that he came to me for advice, right? But I don't just throw the advice out there without having him to think into it as well. And then when he come to a decision, right, based upon the conversation that we have, 9 times out of 10 is going to be the same thing that I'm thinking. And then at the end, I tell him, I say, that is the right decision, right? Because now, instead of me telling him what to do, I am teaching him how to think. And when I teach him how to think, I applaud him for coming to the appropriate decision based upon the conversation we have. Now, if he doesn't come to the appropriate decision and he still want to, as they say, chase the bag, well, let me ask this question. If this is the case, and this company has shady ethics, and this company get caught up in a scandal or some type of litigation matter based upon their shady ethics, what do you think that's going to say to you or say about you in the long run when you leave this company? Because at that point in time, you're going to want to leave and try to go to another company. Don't you think the interviewer is going to ask you where your resume said you used to work for, this particular company over here? What was your position there? And, I mean, of course, they're going to say your resume, but did you know that these were so now you see what I'm saying? It start opening other doors. So you got to play the long game. Stop playing the short game. That's my advice, not just for my son, but for everybody. Play the long game. Stop playing the short game. The short game gets you caught up quick. The long game, that's the one that sets the conditions for you to build. And that's what you should be doing at the age of 20 anyway.
Yeah, I like your response way better than what I had going on in my head, because I was starting with um because you asked for advice, leave it alone. Or either, how much are you willing to lose over this high paying job? That's where I would start at. But after listening to you, it makes more sense to not necessarily offer the advice and to hang around why is he unsure and to explore that. Because if you're unsure, maybe you're self-conscious, or maybe something in there is already telling you maybe you shouldn't take this job. Maybe that's who you need to listen to. So I think definitely exploring that piece first is better than what I was going to do. And and like I said at the beginning of the show, this is why I wanted to have the conversation with you, because of different things like this, because I am a father. And part of the reason behind this show, part of the reason behind elevated dialogue and different things like that, was because I wanted to have conversations about certain things, being a parent, one of them, for my children to go back and watch and have insight on. And this is a perfect example of me thinking one way but having another father who thinks a different way, and how I can learn from another father or another parent. You know what I'm saying? So again, this all just came full circle as why some of these platforms were created, and why this particular conversation was brought up, and to specifically have it with you versus on Hearts of Men. Because I thought about it for over there. I was like, no, I want to be selfish, and I just want to be greedy, and I won't coach all to myself on this one. So it is what it is. So
But
um
remember, 2% of the people of the world think. 3% of the people in the world think they think. 95% of the people in the world would rather die before they think. I don't want my son in the 95%. I
I
want my
don't
son in
either.
the 2%. So
Mhm.
even when he come for advice, I reserve my advice and put him in a position to where I am now soliciting him to think. And not only that, I am teaching him how to think. The school system should never teach you how to think. Your child should know how to think before they go to school. But what we do is we allow the school system to teach our child how to think. That's not accurate because the school is only going to teach them how to think linearly, which means I need one plus one in order for me to come up to two. But there are other ways I can come to a solution without the prescribed method of thinking that you gave me. And that's what
Mhm.
we want to do for our kids.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think more parents should focus on it. I didn't know that. You know what I mean? I'm learning stuff today, and unfortunately or not unfortunately, my kids are all grown, but they can go back and they can watch this video and they can see, and they can have conversation with their wives, whatever like this about, far as how they may approach it, when it's their time and when they're in the same situation. So
Yeah.
definitely appreciate you for all of that stuff. Here's another question. We rolling through this. Shoot. Here's a question. Is there ever a time when it's okay to follow instead of lead? And I think that a few weeks ago on Hearts of Men, this kind of came up with certain circles and stuff like this, where
Right.
sometimes you may be part of a circle and you're required to be in that circle, and your job is to be the leader of that circle and not just be a team member. So um yeah. Is there ever a time when it's okay to follow instead of lead?
It's funny you recall that because that's exactly what I was thinking. And
Mhm.
my response back then is the same response now,
Yeah.
right? Even if you are, so the answer to this question is simple. Yes. Um, and when is that time? All the time.
All the
Even
time.
all the time. I don't care who you think you are, you need that in your life. So if I think I'm a leader, there is a leader that you need, right? Um, the clear indicator of a good leader is the fact that they're a good follower. Even with the example I gave on that Friday night, it's like if you are the leader of that team, your responsibility is to improve the team. So you should go out there and find other people and bring them into the team so that when it's time for them to talk about their skill set and the value that they can add to the team, you become a follower of that person in that particular point in time. Every good leader is a good follower first. Let me say that part again. Every good leader is a good follower first. That's why people look at you to be a leader because you have shown that you understand how to follow. And during that time of followership, what you're learning is you're learning the right leadership acumen, if you will. Not only that, you're learning some things about yourself and you're learning how to, handle people better. I don't care. And we're in a world where right now skill set is the most important thing. And all people do is talk about skill set.
Mhm.
I have
Yep.
a different perspective of that, right? Skill set is good. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not taking away from any skill set out there. But regardless of what you think you do, the thing that you must be good at is people. If you're not good at people, people don't really care about what you do. It's the old saying I use all the time that I got from John Maxwell. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. So when you get good at the people business, then your skill set matters. But if I'm only good at the skill set and I abuse the people, they'll be like, man, forget your skill set. I'll go find somebody else with the same skill set and be willing to pay them more money to teach me how to do it.
Mhm. Mm. This was a good one. I'm gonna hit what I'm gonna instead of what we're gonna do today, coach, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna hit another fact or myth.
Sure.
I'm gonna do two of them real quick, and then I want to get to one question. Instead of doing our actionable advice, that last question to kind of be our kind of close out, our kind of lead out question. Um, and the first fact or myth is this: fact or myth, social media makes it harder for young men to lead. Fact or myth?
This is a really good question, by the way. Um, and the reason why I say that because leadership is all about people,
Mhm.
people business. And I think this goes back to what we talked about that Friday night. You
Mhm.
mentioned, I think it was that Friday night. It was either that Friday night or one of Coach's Corner where you mentioned about being in meetings online and how you
Mm.
didn't, yeah, right. And
Yeah, I
so
remember that.
that's the challenge. So how do I know? Like we're doing this show. And sure, when we do it live, we can see the chats and things of that nature. But when we do recordings, I don't really know what people are saying. I don't really know
Mhm.
what people are thinking. I don't even know if whether or not it resonates. The only thing I have is what the platform tells me in response to the show when we put it out. And we look at the show and we see the numbers. And in our mind, we think high numbers equate to a lot of followers. No, that just means that what you were talking about resonated with them. And so they probably shared it with other people, and then more people started watching it. How do you quantify you being a leader on social media?
Yeah.
Well, really, you can't. Just like we said, some people may come to social media for information. People coming to you for information does not necessarily validate you as a leader. So when this question is posed, social media makes it harder for young men to lead. My initial thought is fact, but if I'm only looking at social media as my platform for leadership, then it is 100% no question fact. But if I'm a leader in my community, I'm a leader in my home, I'm a leader at work, I'm a leader at church, and I have a social media platform and I only got 5 followers, well, that doesn't mean that social media made it hard for me to lead. It just means that social media is probably not the place that I'm called to lead. So I
Mm.
think we got to understand some things about leadership. I think one of the biggest things we struggle with is trying to find a space that where we're called to lead. And a lot of people, because they want the money aspects of social media, because they're chasing the the glamour show that they see. Mr. Beast has all these. Like, Mr. Beast is like an anomaly.
Mhm.
You're not going to be the next Mr. Beast. I'm sorry. Let me say it like that. There's
Yeah.
only going to ever be one Mr. Beast. There's only going to ever be one Elon Musk. Stop trying to be
Mhm.
like them people. Be the best version of yourself and lead through that lens. When you do that, now people start seeing you as being authentic. When you do that, now people be like, you know what? There's something about Mr. Martin that I like. Let me keep going back to him and hearing what he got to say. And then that 5 followers turn into 50 followers, and then 50 to 100, and so forth and so on. Because you're not trying to be like Mr. Beast. You're not trying to be like Elon Musk. You're trying to be the best version of yourself. And in the midst of doing that, the person that you're on camera is the exact same person that you are in the community.
All right. I like it. I like it. This may go back to some of the stuff that, we talked about earlier in the show. So this is another factor myth. There were some people who were in leadership positions and then they did some things and they were no longer in those positions anymore. So do you think factor myth failure disqualifies someone from being a leader?
Another great question. Um, and as people are putting and I know they're banging their keyboard putting this answer in there.
Mhm.
The initial
Disagree.
answer, yeah, the initial answer is fact, right?
Mhm.
And here's why I say that. Because if that person in their mind disqualified themselves from being a leader, then they are disqualified from being a leader. Going back to what the example, my son applying for the leadership school and things of that nature,
Yep.
and he felt unsure that he was not leadership material.
Mhm.
If we never have that conversation, then 9 times out of 10, that's where he's gonna stay at. And then because he is unsure and he continues to think into that, he will never apply to go to that leadership school again. Now, this also goes back to what I answered in the beginning. He may be seen as a leader in some settings, but he is not necessarily exercising leadership abilities. Now, that's my initial answer. But the easy button answer is that this is a myth, right?
Mhm.
Failure does not disqualify you from anything, especially if you recognize failure as a thing that you should learn from. And if you recognize failure as a thing that you should learn from, then from that point on, you learn the lesson about you, not about it, and then make the changes and then try again. So the answer is myth. But for the person who believes it disqualifies them from being a leader, to them it's fact.
Mm, I like it. I like it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to wrap up with this last question of the evening, then we're going to let y'all go. Appreciate y'all being here with us for these extra few minutes. As always, appreciate it. We want to be respectful of you guys' time as well. So, last question of the evening, Coach. Can a man lead others if he doesn't know how to lead himself first?
Can? Yes. Should? No. I hate to be as that
Nope.
matter of fact, but that's it. Can he
Mhm.
lead others? Absolutely. There's a whole
Mhm.
bunch of people who, like we said, people don't want to think. So if that person has achieved a degree of success, right, just by virtue of working, doing, but I'm sorry, just by virtue of having a skill set, and that skill set has catapulted him into the realms of success, whether he sings, rap, play football, basketball, whatever. You see it all the time. Can that person lead others? Absolutely, because people are going to want to follow them just because of the success. Should they lead others? Absolutely not. In fact,
Mhm.
they should turn people away when they want to be. No, don't try to be like me. I'm still working on some things. Let me be completely honest. The only reason I've achieved what I've achieved because I have a set of skills that people are willing to pay a lot of money for. But I am not in a place to where I should lead another person's child.
I agree. I think there are some people out there. I think there's a lot of people out there right now who are leading people down wrong paths. I was one of those people. I was married and I was not leading my family properly. I can be transparent about it. So,
Yeah.
can a man lead others if he doesn't know how to lead himself? Absolutely, 100%. And also, like Coach said, should he? Probably not. You know what I'm saying? But somebody got to get promoted to E5, so that's another story. But um,
I see what you did there.
yep, we got to promote somebody. So um, you got anything else before we wrap up, Coach? Man, that was a
Man,
good
listen,
one.
I believe this was a good one as well. Um, it is a parent's responsibility to help that child achieve the best version of themselves in their life. And I know a lot of times we tend to focus on only one thing, right? We want them to get the high paying job. We want them to go to the NBA. We want them to go to the NFL. Stop that. We call those fantasies. Make that person a good person first. Focus on doing that, right? If you focus on the character of your child, then whatever it is that they're going to do, they're going to do it. Like you don't have to focus on that, like trying to prescribe what their life is going to look at. Stop that. That's not a parent's job. A parent's job is to make this little human being into a good person first. So what does that mean? That means that we got to help them to root out any insecurities, and you guys know how it is, man. It's like teenage life. That's like the insecurity minefield. Like you want to date this girl and she told you no, and now you all in your feelings. You don't think you are good enough, and all of that stuff. That's your job to massage those pains out, not necessarily continue, right? But help them to learn how to do it themselves. I mean, it's just one of those things. A parent's responsibility, I'm gonna say it again, I know it sounds repetitive. A parent's responsibility is to make that young human being into a good person, point them in the right direction, and then shoot them out into the world so that the world can validate in their minds that they receive proper training at home. Because then at a later point in time, they're going to turn around and look at you and say, Dad, Mom, I am so glad that you were the way that you were. Because I am looking at some of my peers right now and they are struggling with resiliency.
I got it, man. Y'all just got some bonus nuggets right there. So y'all should be glad y'all tapped in for these last 8 minutes of the show. With that being said, Coach, again, appreciate this conversation. Appreciate you. Appreciate the chat. Appreciate y'all here for appreciate y'all for being here with us and all those different things like that. And until next time, we'll see y'all again next Tuesday for another episode of Coach's Corner. We out.